Good morning. Welcome after the short recess, the holiday. Next week, give you all the tips for the exams. That's what I'd like to cover for the exam. I'll put on a fundi for you and what the questions will look like. And it'll be a question base, but I'll try and put it on before next week. So if you've got any questions, then you can ask me next week. Looks like your assignments should be marked by about Friday. If Hendrik works according to his planning, then we should be able to put your marks up as well. And I believe that your marks will be big. You're very ethical people, so thank you. Today, we're at a very interesting part. It's about the 8th commandment. If you want to ask somebody that's small, what would they say? A little child, what would they say? They would say they want something. They want this or that or a little gift here or something like that. People want things. And we see it with old people, the older people as well, when they move to a smaller place, because they've gathered a lot of things and they want a lot of things. Our possessions are very important. If money moves into my place and they take your things, you don't like it. It's your things. There's certain things that you like more, certain clothing which you'll never use, but there's others that you'll use every day. So you like it. So God gave us, within us, everything of ourselves. Everything belongs to Him, but He gives us the privilege that things can belong to us, that we can have possessions. But like everything, there's also the fall that came in, and people had other ideas on how you should use property, and we'll get to that. You get big problems that stand against, and powers that stand against each other, and how one should use it. So we're really going to have a good discussion on how things are seen in a capitalist and how in a communist world, how property and possessions are seen in specific religions. So you know, the 8th commandment is about you shall not steal. But it goes wider than that. It is about how do you handle other people and your own possessions. Malachi 3 verse 8 says that you can rob God. Do you think it's possible? Is it possible to steal from God? Yes. You can only steal the good things from God. Yes. You're correct. It's possible to steal from God. Why? Because if God gives us something, we have to use it in a specific way. I'll give an example. When you were small, you had brothers and sisters, and mother gives me money and says, go and buy something for everybody to eat. And you go and buy something to eat, but you eat it all up. Do you use that money correctly? You actually stole from your brothers and sisters. And similarly, it works now. God gives us certain possessions, and He wants us to use it now. And if we don't use it like that, then we're actually stealing it from Him. So we can steal from God. Malachi specifically speaks about people that don't do what they should to give to God. I've got something and I've got to give 10% to God, or 1/10, and I keep it back because I think my work is more important than His. It always reminds me of that song by Koos du Plessis, what I have is only grace. We are, what should a Christian do instead of stealing? how do you get yourself to the point of not stealing? If you don't covet, so how do I fight against that? If I give, yes, if you give, it's more blessed to give than to receive, exactly. Sorry, this air conditioning is making a noise a bit, so just speak up please. It's as soon when I don't just take, but I also give. Because it says there, those that steal must stop, a thief that must be stealing, he's got to work, and he's got to work to get things for himself, but also to give to the poor. So the way in which you get that urge to take, and rather than to give, that's what we want. And then we get to the heart of the case. Fine. Let's get to the next point. The Bible speaks of that we are stewards of God. What is a steward? And what kind of control does he have? Let's just pass the microphone on. What is a steward? What is a steward? That is, it's a guardian, it's like a butler, it's a guardian. But in what sense? Like property, possessions? Yes. It's like being a stewardship. Somebody has a bicycle and they borrow the bicycle, and it's given to you for a few years, and you've got to look after it. And the guy trusts you with possessing that, and someday he's going to ask to get the bicycle back. In a sense, that's a very good example. It never becomes yours. You are a manager of something. And I say, here's my business, will you please manage it? Here's my bicycle, use it, but I want it back at some stage. And then we've got the parable of the talents. You've got so many talents, and you've got to get something better back by working with that. So you don't borrow a car from somebody and give it back without petrol. You've got to give it back to somebody in a better situation, a better condition. He makes us a manager of something that what he gives us, we've got to do something better with it. And that is our next question. Man as steward of God. What does that mean? I'm not the owner of what I've got. It's a very difficult concept, and because from small I say it's mine, it's mine, it's mine. You know what the little children say. But it's not really yours. It's mine in the sense of that I'm responsible for it. It is in my possession, but I'm only the manager or the steward of it. And if we look at everything like that in life, it makes you peaceful. And you get to the point, but how must I do that? Let's see. Let's look at the right of property, to own property. Communistic system says, let us share and give to everyone what they need. Marx and Lenin says capitalism, which we'll talk about just now, that exploits the people. So what we do is each household will give exactly what they need, but everybody just carry on. So what work you do, you get what you need. What do you think of a principle like that? Everybody works hard and everyone gets what they need. Sounds like a good principle. Let's hear. Raj. India is one communist party. What happened in previously? The people in India and many people that were out of the country, outside of the country, came and they took the land and they gave something to the people in the land, a bribery, etc. They gave them jobs, high positions, and so on. And they took away their land. And they took the ruling over that land. Now there's the big problem. There's a big fight between the people, the communist group, and they killed the politicians, get the people in high positions. They want their land back. They want to sell all the property. And everywhere everybody should have equal amount of property. But this is a very bad things that happened here in India. Many people have a fear about the communist group. They used to kill the soldiers. They don't allow anybody to come and have their own property. I think you are summing it up summarizing it very well. Yes. The problem is, it sounds good. Everybody works hard and everybody gets what they need. But there are various reasons why it won't work. The most important, there was a fall. So what happened? You give the power to decide who needs what and who's got to do. You give it to a few individuals. And those people use their power. So if you've got somebody that is in control and that person is without sin, it'll work. But the minute you have a sinful person, and that is why communism has never worked in any country where it's been implemented. All those countries went backward. And there's a second one, but also it's not just the one with power, but also the people themselves. If I know I'm going to get what I need, why will I work hard? God made possessions as one of the things that it'll get you as far to work. He'll get you to become hungry, so you've got to work. A lot of people would have done nothing if they did not become hungry. They would have just sat around, but because they are hungry, they go and they beg. They don't work, or those that work, they just go to get a little bit of money. Because the sinfulness of that person, the sinful nature, says, I'm not going to work that hard because I get what I need. And that cannot be approached in this. That's why God from the beginning said He gave you possessions and you've got to work with it and you've got to make it work. Socialism, do you know what that is? It's something of private possession, but you also divide amongst people. It is a forced welfare, and it's becoming very strong in South Africa and also most Africa country. But there are people that can exploit it. They don't have to work. Other people have got to work extra hard, pay taxes, so that these people can be looked after. And if you've got enough capitalists that can bring in money, then you can maintain socialism. But when everybody is socialism, the whole government will fall down. Because capitalist creates work. Problem with capitalism, and there's something that stands next to it, and it's called materialism. Sometimes with capitalism, people just want, and they exploit others to get all the money and to be totally materialistic. That's why the Bible is very clear about how we should deal with it. Must not make too much profit, and so on. And that's what we're going to look at. So in principle, private possession, private property is a biblical principle. And everyone got something. And as from a child on, you are taught to have responsibility even with your property or possessions. But you must not use it in a wrong way. What you've got is you are only a steward of. So none of these systems work eventually. The hard capitalism caused that there was tremendous exploitation. With the Industrial Revolution in Europe, people were exploited tremendously. they actually controlled everybody's life. It becomes like slaves. And there's even now countries where rich owners use child labor to make as much money as they put in. So that naked capitalism is sin, just like communism eventually is wrong. God wants us to own our own property, but we need to really deal with it as good stewards. Today is an easy one. We're going through it very quickly. Are earthly possessions important? If we look at in Mark 10, he says to that rich young man, he says, what must I do to get the eternal life? Jesus says, go and sell everyone and give it to the poor, and then come to me and follow me. Is that what we need to tell our people? Sell everything and give it to the poor. And if you really are pure, then you come to the church. Is that the message that the church must bring? What do you say? How should we answer that? It says not to idolize anything. So the rich man, every possessions he had, he idolized in the sense that he couldn't let them go. I don't think it's about giving it away physically. It's more an issue that he wasn't willing to throw these things aside and to gain tract. That's a very fantastic summary. It's what his idol was. His security was attached to his property and his possession. That's why I know the answer is not to sell everything, but follow me. But these things stop him from following him. His business interests were more important than following Jesus. The few questions. Good morning, Professor and colleagues. People working less and less and move their responsibility to others. See, that is the sinfulness of man. That is why God built in these systems. A rich man take out a policy and pays 30,000 rand per month of somebody who's terminally ill. You see, sometimes if we have a system, there are also very good ways of providing for yourself. And let's say, for instance, in the time when my children were small, they couldn't look after themselves. I know that now, if something happens, they'll probably, if it happen now, so I take out a policy on my life. If something happens to me, there is money for them to be looked after. And so I also am a responsible person and take out a policy on my life that say if I am injured as such that I cannot do my job, that at least there is some income. So I provide. But then sometimes people use the system to enrich themselves. And any false enrichment is wrong. That was not the intention of this. He says, okay, mother-in-law is going backwards, and I can use that. Ethically, your intention is to exploit the system, get the policy money, and other people have to pay more and more and more, so that ultimately your big policy needs to be covered. Sorry, where's the microphone? Cannot hear it. That's why there are strict rules for this type of thing. There are a lot of people that get ways to go around it and to make monies out of the system. And it's with everything in our life. My question is, do I eventually end up with what I'm supposed to do, what I am purposed to do? And that is not, self-enrichment is not the purpose. It is to care. And we get this, and sometimes it is found out. It's about the man who eventually, when it was proven that he murdered his own wife, and he took out a big policy on her life, and you can see the whole sinfulness of the case. Are earthly possessions really important? What does the 8th commandment say? He says, He gave a commandment, you shall not steal. You cannot take anything that isn't yours. In other words, possessions are important. It's part of my being part of God. He made me, He owns this world, and He makes me steward of a portion of that so that I can look after my things that He's given me. Then we get to the next point. I can use the system wrongly. The brain mentions 4 kinds of stealing labor. The first one is, and that is plagiarism. We'll speak a little bit. What is plagiarism all about? I pretend that what somebody else did, with the work that somebody else did it, that I did it. So actually I'm stealing his work. That's what it boils down to. You happy with that definition? Second one, let's evaluate profiteering. It's profiteering where they get a hunger salary. And a lot of people from outside Africa is not allowed to work, but they give them very little to work. And they don't even give them their salaries always because they know they cannot go and moan about it because they will be put out of the country. That is stealing labor, actually stealing off them. Yeah, and I'm not giving him what it was. I'm profiting out of it. Also, that is stealing labor. You'll get that in practice, that people do that. In India, Mukesh and Raj's brother-in-law said, people work in clothing factories and get no wage basically at all. They're just being kept alive, just enough to survive and have some food tonight and to come back tomorrow morning to work. And this is stealing labor. You don't give what the person needs. The person is actually handled like an animal. Right? Same thing with slavery. Exactly the same principle. Then, third one is workers that do half of what they're supposed to do and claim full pay. I'm not giving good work, but I demand payment. You think it happens nowadays, today? Yes. If you preach about this, can you say to people, what type of work do you deliver? And the last one is unnecessary strikes. Can a striker steal from his employer? Yes. I think in South Africa specifically we've got too many strikes. If something is wrong, you've got to deal with it and solve it on the right way. But sometimes I feel whatever the solution is, they must be striked first. And the people that force the strike down, sometimes they destroy their own members' work. Because a lot of the mines are saying, I can't be profitable. So they close and people lose their jobs. So what happens in a country, and it also happens in our country, the work that's supposed to be delivered and the salaries that are being paid, they don't correspond with one another. It can either be either way, too little or too much. Ultimately, all of those things are stealing labor. Labor theft. Strikers are being instigated so that the people in control get more for themselves. If you look at how many of these unions work, the people that walk out of this rich are the labor union leaders or the people that own the companies. But the poor people that work, the laborers, they lose their jobs. Oh, it's an easy day today. You're happy about all that. Then we get to the next one, and that is evaluate profiteering. can we profiteer? Can we ask profit? Can we charge a profit? And with point 5, we get to the point of charging interest. Are we allowed to charge interest? Somebody says, okay, I need a few rands, but I'll give you a little bit more. I go to the bank, you want to borrow off them, and they said, okay, you can pay it back so much interest. Is that right? Sometimes, always, only now and then. How does that work? Who've ever been to a bank and got charged interest? Did you say to the bank manager and say, sorry, it's wrong if you want to buy a house and so on? Is it right, or should we eliminate these things? I think in a certain sense it's right. It's wrong if you charge too much interest. If we've got to ask, charge enough so that at least what you charge or give, you get back. But if we look at it from a biblical point of view, you see the manager that's got money, and he says to the one, he says, why didn't you at least just go and hand it in, the guy with the talent? Interest is not wrong, but it's the amount of interest. Why isn't it wrong? You see, I want to get a business and I need money. I want to start a business. I've got a little bit of extra money because inflation is going to eat it. So I take my money and I lend it to you, and you start your business and I make a profit on it. At least I don't want to let my money devaluate, but I want to enable you to do something, but I'm taking a risk of giving you that money, so we help each other. Don't only help people with my time, energy, and so on, but also with my property and his possessions. But the Bible is very serious. If there's a poor person, you should charge no interest or as little interest as possible. So you should actually just cover your costs, or sometimes not even that. You shouldn't even ask back in sometimes. There are also boundaries and borders to that. Then you get the unrighteous way of making profit. So it's not wrong to do a good investment, because effectively money that you got through your own hard work, you give to somebody else. But it becomes part of and it all becomes part of the stewardship of God. Because you make it available for others. Everybody happy? Reaction? Fine. We spoke about profiteering. Any excessive profit. But what is excessive? What is too much profit? People have a feel for that, but somebody goes outside of that. I can not say to this person that I am the only person that sells these type of shoes. Everybody needs these shoes. Let's say here at the university we have a prescription, or we are prescribed to use this type of shoe, and I'm the only person that provides these shoes. What can I do? I can make my profit excessive. So I actually exploit you because you have to get your shoes from me. And I know in certain handbooks, sources, it works like that, and people charge excessively for that. So it's the wrong type of thing. 6 objections against gambling. What is gambling all about? Define it. Is it wrong to gamble? I've got a little bit of extra money. I see the guys are playing here in the street. I go and sit place a bit of money. If I lose, no problem. If I win, go and buy my girlfriend something. Or I go and play the lotto. Put a little bit of money on the lotto. I know my chances are just about null, but if I do win, then fine. How do you answer that? Am I right? Can I carry on like that? Is that right to do it that way? Swami? In the first place, you didn't work for that money. You're putting your hope in something that you didn't work for. How do you earn it then? Your question is, do you earn it? Property or possession is what you earn. Also a principle that we get in the scriptures. Let me say, in short, I mentioned 6. Let's look at the 6 objections that the brain gives to us. And number 5 is the most important one, but we'll get to that one. The first one, in general, whose money is this that I am gambling with here? Actually, it's God's money. Why did He give this money to me? What was the purpose of it? How can I apply it? If I really have got a little bit of extra money, what must I do with that? You understand that question? Can somebody give me an answer to that? Whose money is it? Actually, God wants me to apply it in a certain way. Now, I hope. Do you think there are people that play the lotto that don't hope? Can I say, Lord, please let me win the lotto? Can I pray to God like that? If God has to decide who needs it the most, do you think it'll be you? If you think about it, there are always people that are poorer than you are, that's got a bigger need. So actually, you should hope and pray that somebody else wins it, the one that needs it. But what happens if that poor person wins it? Most people that win the lotto, they had crises afterwards. You've read that. Guy doesn't know what to do with the money. Other people are being exploited, and maybe the poorest person will get it. Or maybe the person that gets it has to work very wisely with it. Raj, let's hear. One of my friends in one Bible training, he was from Delhi. He's involved in gambling and the lottery. And winning, he got a lot of money, got many plots, he bought plots, expensive plots, and he became addicted to that. And eventually he lost everything, his house, he didn't have a place to stay. So my question is, does God really want us to be in that particular situation? Is it from God? In short, I don't believe when you win the lotto, you're busy with you doing what God wants. You're busy with sin, in short. I'll explain in Afrikaans. Let me put it this way. The question one is, why have I got possessions or property? It's because God gave it to me to use it correctly. If I've got little, I've got to use it to the best. And it may be necessary. Is it necessary for others to support me? Jesus said they are rich and they are poor. But the rich should exercise their responsibility. Say if I've got little and I take the money that my children use and I go and play it on the lotto, then it's wrong. If I've got a lot, what must I do? I must create work. I should use the money so that it profits other people, and I should share where it's necessary. Now, how do you share? The Bible says the left hand should not know what the right hand is doing. Well, I shouldn't give to expect anything back. But what is the heart of lotto or gambling is I give to get back. So it's more through selfishness. You don't give because you want to get back. But if you really want to give without getting back, that's the right way. That's why he says there, who that steals must stop stealing. And if I give to the poor, it should not be to become rich. What you've got to manage for the sake of the people in your household, around you, for the kingdom of God and the church. And now I take that money and I go and play it on something which is wrong. Gambling is an idol. The 6 points. First one. Your trust in God goes into the trust in a God of luck. I don't think there's one Christian that can play the lotto that can pray that they win it. And you pay, because if you pray that, you pray it at the cost of other people. Money they have, other people haven't got, they put on the lotto and it wrongly becomes yours. So if you cannot pray to God for something, then you actually put your trust in another God. And second, the motive of work in the Bible, we must earn. It's what I earn, what I work for, which is right. This is outside of the whole equation. So somebody that runs the company and I write out checks to him, it's a way of stealing. You're getting money outside of the relation to what it should actually be. Third one, you break the biblical principle of the relationship between the wage and actions, and then offering. It says you've got one and I shouldn't know what the other one, and then you also wish that if you give money to charity, you get money out of that. But don't take money that I have to give somebody that is greedy, to give them a good price. If somebody comes to me and says, listen, I've got tickets you've got to fill in and maybe you'll win something, I take it, I draw through them and I say, okay. And I give it to them back to say, listen, I give, I don't want back. Gambling, if you sell tickets to win a prize. The one about taking lots, is it wrong to buy little tickets, but to give money for the purpose of it? Let's say, for instance, if you buy money for community service, if you give it not to win, get back. If you know that you cannot win this and you buy the ticket and you tear it up and you don't fill it in, don't give it back, then you know you cannot win, but you gave it for the cause of the whole thing. So that's fine. I did not get that. Very interesting story in Hinduism. It's fighting. There were two parties. The Maratha are fighting. They were gambling to each other. At the last, the one party lost everything. Possessions, their land, houses. And at the last, they lost themselves, their wives, and they became slaves. They had to go to the jungle and spend time in the jungle working there. So for me, it's a bad thing to gamble. We can call it evil things, and attracts the people to come and earn the money in that way. It's similar to any sin. When you start it small, it grows bigger. And in the end, you cannot stop yourself. You keep on gambling, and in the end, you've lost everything. That's part of the whole thing. Sin has a way in which you don't get enough. And it draws you deeper and deeper into it. Remember, your example, so I say, okay, I do it to support myself. If I win something, I'll give part of that or for charity or for the church. But in your example, people see your influence, and that this has got this drawing power. And a lot of people are addicted to gambling, and they sit there at the casinos over and over and over. It is a slave to that. They also say you've got to be at a certain age to partake, because they reckon that you are responsible enough. But you know that they've got help and assistance for people that have got a problem with that. The next one that Professor De Bruin, and that is your greediness. In other words, for the cost of others. Instead of loving God, he doesn't mind who loses their money as long as he wins. And once again, go and see who stands in the row. You can see rich and poor stand in that row to take their lottery cards. And you want their all. You're so greedy, you want all their money. And the sixth point, he refers to our communion formulary, which says no gamblers will be allowed in the kingdom of God. And the reason is that apart from the fact that you are greedy, is you're not using the money correctly. You're actually a spendthrift. God gave us very good guidelines. You may not steal, but you've got to apply your money correctly. And other people that are spending their money wrongly, that also want to win the prize, you take this on such an illegal way that it's totally outside of that. Can you talk? Will you be able to talk to people about that? Then, how ethical are pawn shops? People pawn to survive. I hope you don't own a pawn shop, because these are the people that have made me cross. Because poor congregation members take things that they need and they go and pawn them. I stood here on the boat and I saw there was somebody advertising, bring your phone or your computer and bring it and come and pawn it if you need money. So I thought, okay, the students that are battling, they haven't got food, what will they do? Somewhere they got a laptop and they go and they pawn it because they hope next month they'll get money. He says what this guy is doing, he's exploiting people that do not have, and he's exploiting their bad situation. So the whole action of pawning is something of loveless, where you can really help somebody. I say, I'll give you this money, I'll take this thing of yours which is important, I take your external hard drive, I take it, but if you give the money, I'll give it back to you. Not to make a profit, but it's to help the person. That's what happens with pawning. Even there in the West Rand, there were very poor people in our congregation, and the woman works just enough. But all this guy does, he takes a lawnmower and he goes and he pawns it, or a sewing machine, and he goes and he pawns it so that he can go and use it on his own pleasure. That's the closest that I ever got being hit is when I went into a pawn shop and I said, give it back to the person that took it. They get cross. But let's leave it at that. They really exploit the people. And not just 20%, he could actually go and buy something brand new for what they charge at the pawn shop. Anybody, anything about that? Then, your attitude towards labor and work. Daniel 1. Let's just get to that. Daniel 1, verse 20 and 21. Daniel had to work for Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was a man that killed so many of their people. He took them away, banished them. He idolized people. He took the temple equipment and put it in his temple. Now Daniel is going to come and work for Nebuchadnezzar. How did Daniel work for them? Did they do good work for him or bad work? They did good work. If you read Daniel 20, it says, so in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians. And he said, if I do this work for you, I'll do it to the best. And then Colossians 3:23, it says very clearly, whatever I work, I don't work for people, I work for God. God calls me. He gave me the gifts, and I'm using my gifts. So I should use it to the best of my ability. But I do not overstep the burden. We see with their 3 sons, or if anybody else asks from Daniel, pray to this image, they were prepared to die in that oven. Good work, because they do it for God, but always within the boundaries. But then, the interesting one, 2 Thessalonians says, he that does not work must not eat, or will not eat. Can we give beggars money? And give them money if they are not in a position to work. Many of them had physical defects and they cannot work. The principle that you're using is he that not wants to work. That person wants to work, but he cannot. Old people, even babies, they lie there, they cannot work. It's not that they don't want to work, they just cannot, they're not able. But if somebody's not able to work, we've got to look after them. Good. If somebody can work but does not want to work, is able to work but cannot work. In Pretoria where I was for a while, sorry, say again. In Pretoria where I was an old man and woman, deep in their 70s. And every day they stood at this robot, not far from the church building where our church was. And Professor Naas went and spoke to them. And quite a few of us went and spoke to them and said, we can give you a little bit of work here, we can give you a little bit of housing. And they said, no, we're happy. And one day when I went to them, says, do you know who stays next to us? How do I know? No, it's that old man and woman that they go with their car, they park at the shopping center, they walk across, they beg, everybody's sorry for them, gives them money, they go and buy their food, gets in the car and come back to their house. That means those 2 people, they exploited the fact that other people want to help them. And it's important that we think in church, how do we assist people? We must be careful. If somebody comes to me, if they do something for me, even if they wash the car, but somebody that just comes in and begs, there are places where they can actually earn money. We had a few places like that in Pretoria, outside of Potchefstroom. They've got Hebron, where beggars and they can go there and they can stay for free, but they've also got to work. But what happens? He becomes thirsty, comes into town, goes and begs till he's get enough money, and then he drinks himself drunk and he goes back there. So if you give him money, you actually cause that whole thing to become unproductive. So sometimes you do wrong if you give to people money. Principle, he who does not want to work will not eat. One that I missed, he's an accountant who worked there. He said no, he doesn't want to work anymore, so he goes and he makes money by begging. I think we've got to really start applying this principle. He who does not want to work will not eat. Sometimes those that want to work just haven't got the opportunity. Also happy with that. Oh, today we're agreeing with everything. We said, can we charge interest? Let's get to the whole question of avarice. Greed. You've got somebody in your congregation one day and is very rich, but is very greedy, doesn't want to help anybody. How do you deal with that person? Person does not contribute, has got a tremendous amount of money, can help where there is need, with mission work, other countries. Which verse would you use in the Bible to get this greedy person to change his mind? I will tell him, according to the scripture, you must give. That I build a relationship with a person and establish a trust and show them that there's a beautiful relationship, being able to sow in the kingdom, to make an impact, has an opportunity to do that, instead of commanding him and forcing him to do something. If he sees that you really care about him in this relationship, I think that in his heart, he'll probably give out of his free will. So it's important what you're saying. He's got to see the love of God in you to understand how life has changed. I agree with you. That's the right way of approaching it. But let's say this person says, no, I don't want to contribute. He can, but he doesn't want to. And there's an urgent need. People need money. They're people in crisis. He knows about it. I explain to them lovingly, but he still does not want to contribute. And his wife says, he doesn't want to even give me money to buy groceries. He just wants his money in the bank, and he just tells everybody how much money. What's the next step you take? Who's going to help with that? Who's going to help with that? I'll ask him. Who's his God? Is he worshipping Mammon or worshipping God? If really is worshipping God, if his money is going to be taken away, will his trust still be in God? And I think it'll be safe for him to put his trust in God. So he's got that problem that the rich young man had. But then you've got to explain to him that you're making an idol of his money. And you must ask why he's doing that. Because somewhere along the line he's got insecurity within him. So he doesn't really know God in this respect. He can say he knows God, but he doesn't know God in this respect. And you've got to approach it from that. One of my friends worked in a very poor area, but there was one portion where there were people that had a fair amount of money. And the one gentleman said he walked that way, and the person not only he did not even give to the church, but not even to his children. they had to take out loans to keep the children. And all he did was put his own money in the bank. And somebody went and spoke to him, and he contributed 20 rand to the church. And my friend went and gave it to him and said, God is not mocked. And he went away. It's a little bit of a drastic way of dealing with that. But you cannot bribe God. It's a relationship with him. So avarice or greed is a problem. It shows there's a bigger problem and you've got an idol somewhere. Second one, wastefulness. I think, okay, I'll help and here's money, etc., etc. But you know, as the minister or pastor, his wife and children haven't got food at home, but he will keep on and say, listen, I want to give you something, etc. I'll buy you a new bicycle, or I just want to give. He wastes. How do you deal with a person like that? Take the money or take the bicycle and then talk to him. Don't you think we should work in the same way? Friendship, but the person must realize what he owns and the property he's got is not his own, and that he's got to be a steward of it and manage it in the right way. Can't hear that? The whole thing of avarice is idolatry. It's about greed. Greed, avarice, really is the root of all wrong. But wastefulness we also get. The person does not understand what the purpose of property or possession is. Third point, use of possessions to the honor of God. If we talk to people about that and you preach about it, do you think it's an important point to say, how do you use your possessions to the honor of God? Sometimes I hear, if it's about that, it's about the portion that you contribute, your 10th. Must we talk about the 90% as well? Not just the 10%? Please use the microphone. If you think about it, then I'm glad. How do you do that? How do you preach about it? How do you address that? Please use the microphone. Sorry, I'm not getting any. Use it for the maintenance of your household and also, but first of all, you've got to look after your own house. In the first instance, you've got to look after your own house so that they are not in need, and then you go wider. Who else you can help? Otherwise, you neglect your own household. And that is using possessions to help somebody else. Matthew 25, when Jesus comes again, he's going to ask, can you say the 10 commandments in the right order? And then he's going to ask you, give the blessings in the right order. Is that what he's going to ask? What is he going to ask? What is Jesus going to ask when he comes back? I was sick and you visited me. I was hungry and you fed me. I needed clothing and you gave it to me. I was in jail and you visited me. Why does Jesus put emphasis on those? It's a social gospel, just about. Why does he put, what did I do with my money and my possessions? That's what it's all about. Why does he emphasize that? Why does Jesus emphasize that? All of those that do welfare, they'll go to heaven, the rest won't. Is that what he's saying? No. I think it was because no longer caring for those people who were sick and were hungry and did not take care of them. He reminded them they were hungry. I was using it as if it was him, because every person is an image of God. When I was hungry, you did not give me food. When I was in prison, you did not even come to visit me. That's right. He says, as far as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. You're quite right. Man's the people. What does this boil down to? What is this complete? Is my relationship with God eventually spilled over to other people, and how I could help them in my time, my money, and whatever I have. Me and all my possessions, am I in service of God, and do I show the grace of God through what I own and possess? He doesn't say all these other things are not important. He says everything is important, because we are just saved through the grace. We must know His Word, and we grow into a relationship with God. But it's not about what I get, but through me. It's got to flow through to others. One of the most important way it can flow through is that I help other people in their need. People that have no clothes, the sick, those in prisons, those that can't help themselves. He does not emphasize the whole road of our relationship with Him, but we should honor Him through our possessions. You happy with that? It's so important. Therefore, that portion which I will give to a person that's very greedy, I will also read that to him. What have you eventually done with all the grace God gave you? All right? Must we pay tax? The government abuses the money, builds big houses for other people. They bribe people and all so on. So I can't pay tax to this government. He reminded in the Word, the disciples asked Jesus, must we give to the church or the government, Caesar? And Jesus says, whose face is on the coin? Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and what give to God what belongs to God. The state is an institution of God that has to do certain tasks, and they can demand tax. Very clear. The hard saw is that a government sometimes abuses that. That's what we've got, what they call statism. The state interferes where they shouldn't. Now they say this needs to happen in households, schools, etc. But what's happening at this point in time, the state is interfering. But it was a problem in those days. The Romans had the same problem. Caesar had the same problem. The emperor says they had to worship the emperor as God. Jesus said, pay tax, but do it in the right way. You cannot duck and dive and avoid tax or evade tax. Don't pay what you don't have to, but what you have to pay, pay it. The problem is where it's being abused. And we're in a country where there's a lot of tax being paid. If it's all for the causes that they have to, that's no problem. People pay for safety, for the police, but they have to protect themselves. They pay for this and that has to be done on their behalf, but they still have to do it for themselves. So we can see that it's wrongly being applied. Is it also not in the line of, if you pay your tax, you don't sin because you, but the sin is with those corrupt officials, and they will be punished for that. We pay it, we do our righteous thing, our task. But if that person does not execute his task and you've got no influence, if you've got influence on that, then you can demand that. So you've got your civil rights organizations that can fight for these things. Municipality gets a lot of money, but look what happens in the hospitals. Look at with the water and everything. Then the citizens can approach it in a certain way. But we must not stop paying taxes, okay? Sometimes you sit with the question, what happens to the money? But still, you have to do your side of things and contribute. Well, we spoke about tax. One, get to the dangers of wealth. Maybe let's talk about Proverbs 30. Do not make me rich or poor. This is do not just give me money that I've got. Keep falsehood and lies from me, and give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread, otherwise I may have too much. What are the dangers of riches, and what's the dangers of poverty? Are there dangers? With a rich man, we saw the danger with a rich young man. Do you want to talk about which one? This is easier for a camel to go to the eye of the needle than for the rich man. A rich man won't necessarily let go of everything. That's right. Don't store your treasures on earth where thief and moth can destroy it. That's right. Thank you. Both are important things, if I can say it like this. In those days, the needle, the hole in the wall was very small. But to pull a camel through that, when the gates were closed, camel had to go down on its knees and had to be pulled through, and it was a problem to get that camel through that. For a rich man to go into heaven, he has to go down on his knees and get help, and a person that is important doesn't want to go on his knees. So it's quite true. Riches sometimes, wealth sometimes makes you think, I can see to myself, and I'll pay my portion to the church. That's also payment for my eternal life, but for himself. The crisis is there to realize how dependent you are upon God. Fine. Poverty, can that be dangerous? What does he say? If I'm poor, it can make that I can start steal. May become poor and steal. Remember, I can steal in my heart, need not always be physical. So poverty can also be dangerous. That's why we have to help those that are poor as far as possible. Good. Then, of course, there are relative concepts. You think you're very poor if you compare yourself with certain people, but if you look at the other way, you actually are more rich. In Timor, in Indonesia, the Christians there, they live in little mud houses, things that are washed away when it rains, but the way they live there, and the minister's household only had 2 chickens, and they slaughtered the one. And they slaughtered one of the 2, very poor, but they were deeply faith-believing people. Then I realized, we think in those days, I lived in a poor area, worked in a poor area, but then I realized that we're actually more rich than compared to that island. We also have to look at those that have more difficult than you have, because that makes a difference on your attitude. And this is what I experienced in that congregation. that the poor people, that with the little that they get, they will give to you, shows you that caring, even if they are poor. Theology of deliverance, it says that God is on the side of the poor, the one that has got nothing. Is that necessarily true? Jesus said, I am there for the widow and the orphans and those that are oppressed. He doesn't want that to happen. But a poor person is not always the one that goes to heaven and the rich one goes to hell. God is on the side of his children, whether rich or poor, but he does not want unrighteousness. What is bribery? You bring me a little bit of biltong next time, I'll give you more questions in the exam. If you bribe me that way. No, I don't want it that way. So what do you say is bribery? It is a the policeman that stops me, and if I give it to him, pay the fee, this guy's got a problem, I'll give him 50 rand instead of paying a 500 rand. Is that bribery or not? Many people, ways in which we explain why we bribe, but it is not right. You can bring the biltong, but don't give it to me as a bribery gift. And I'm only joking. What do you like, game biltong or not? Do I like beef or game biltong? Professor Brain says very clearly, to offer gifts or money, through that you get certain advantages for yourself. That is what bribery is all about. I'll give you money or gifts out of relation of what you give to me, back to me. And eventually, I'm busy with an illegal practice. I want something which I do not deserve. I'm busy with an illegal thing. There are two types of bribery. There's the active bribery and passive bribery. It's got a nice way to say the active bribery is that the person that does the bribery. The passive bribery is the one that receives it. I can't help it. You brought me biltong, so what can I do? I wasn't part of the bribery, it was you. Is it true? If I receive it, I give to you what you wanted, here's the exam paper, then I am also guilty of bribery. I cannot say I'm not guilty to it. I said, but there was money and I had to stamp this guy's passport and there's a lot of money in it. Thank you for thinking of it. And I stamp it. You understand? So the person that does the bribery and the one that receives it, they are both transgressing what God meant with. Then we get a bigger problem. We're battling more and more with our students, that we want to get students to come this way, he says. They say, what's in it for me at the embassy, they say. Student, if you don't give anything more, then I'm just going to let this thing of yours dawdle and then it takes longer. We're sitting in a bigger and bigger problem to deal with this in the correct manner. One of my friends said one day, only thing I can give you, I've got a Bible in your language, do you want it or not? And if you take it, just read about the 8th commandment. That says the 3 reasons bribery is sin. Ultimately, you say you're a Christian, you serve a righteous God, but you act unrighteously. So you are acting unrighteously to God. You're bringing the trustworthiness of the legal system, because now the poor gets nothing. They haven't got money because they cannot bribe. So the law that should act on behalf of the poor, you actually advancing somebody that should not be entitled to it. Just another 2 minutes to go through it. Let's do it quickly. Copyright. What means if you violate copyright? We spoke about that. It means you take something of somebody else and you pretend that it's your work. It's labor theft. The Copyright of South Africa says you cannot do it unless you do it for what purpose? You can use portions of it and copy it if it's for educational purposes. Or where did I write it? Educational purposes. For research, private studies, then you may quote directly. Sorry, I couldn't get that. If you've got approval, copyright says yes. If you have the okay from the auditor or the author, it says you can copy as much as you want. Sometimes it says that. For educational purposes, 15% you can use of that book. Film, if you use it, up to 40% of a movie, if it's for education. You cannot make money out of it, because then that person's got to get interest, copyright. Who are mostly robbed of their income by unauthorized copying? Who? The series. Series are mostly copied, music, books, etc. You actually are taking away, you're robbing somebody of an income. You're taking what is not yours. So which commandment? The 8th commandment, and also the 5th. You go against the laws of the country. And you actually deprive people money to make further movies and so on, which is a loveless action. That's the 8th commandment. I think I've covered it all. Yes. You think you will be able to talk and preach about the 8th commandment next time? We'll do the 9th and the 10th commandment, and I'll give you guidelines. With or without biltong, I'll give you guidelines on the exam. Thank you very much. Okay? Have a blessed week, and thank you. See you.